ultimately you build a development that became the biggest development in New York at that time, which is the Time Warner development.
I was motivated, like most people who, you want to do something impactful in life.
You decided to build something even bigger, which became the biggest real estate development in the history of our country, called Hudson Yards.
Hudson Yards, by building a live, work, play environment right in the middle of New York. There was a real need for it.
So how come your team isn't in the Super Bowl?
That's a good question.
Right?
Would you fix your tie, please?
Well, people wouldn't recognize me if my tie was fixed, but okay. Just leave it this way. All right. I don't consider myself a journalist, and nobody else would consider myself a journalist. I began to take on the life of being an interviewer, even though I have a day job running a private equity firm. How do you define leadership? What is it that makes somebody tick? Many people in the investment world have bought sports teams. I'm not one of them, but I do admire others who have fulfilled their ambitions to get involved in sports. One of them is Steve Ross. He bought the Miami Dolphins a number of years ago, redeveloped the stadium area, and this year he was the host for the Super Bowl. It's an incredible diversion from all the other successful things he's done. Almost everything he touches works out quite well. His business interest, his real estate interest, and now his sports interest. One of the early signers of the Giving Pledge, he's given away hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars for education, among other major purposes. I really admire him as an investor, but also as a humanitarian.
You're going to be the host of the Super Bowl this weekend. So is it hard to get to be the host? Did they just call you up and say, how about doing this? Or is it just a little bit harder than that?
Well, it's very competitive. I think every team in every city really wants a Super Bowl because it's such a great economic development tool, for the city, and how the impact it has is fantastic. I think the fans, they love coming to Miami because we have the best weather this type of the year all the time. But it's the policy of the NFL to reward teams who build new stadiums to get at least one Super Bowl. But I think when this is the 11th time the Super Bowl, which is the most of any city, that the Super Bowl has been in Miami.
Okay, so how come your team isn't in the Super Bowl?
That's a good question.
Right? All right, well,
it's not as easy as you think.
Okay, so let me ask about this. When will the Dolphins be in the Super Bowl? Anytime soon? And I read that Tom Brady might be a free agent. I don't know whether you're allowed to talk about that as an owner, but...
I heard he's going to be a free agent, but I would say that, one, we're not allowed to talk to him until sometime in March. And, we're a team that now it's building. I don't know, why he'd really want to come to the Dolphins. He's probably one of the fiercest competitors there is. And, we're at the stage with the Dolphins trying to really build the team, for the future and doing it through the draft.
When it was announced the Super Bowl was coming here, did a lot of friends of yours say, by the way, I'd like some tickets? Or how do you get tickets for this?
Well, yes, I've been inundated with requests for tickets. Really, the NFL takes over the whole stadium, and they control all the ticketing. In fact, I have to buy my own box. The stadium that I own, I have to buy my own box.
You get a discount or not?
Not really.
Not really?
I'm one of 32.
Okay. When you're an owner of an NFL team, you get together very often with owners. What are those meetings like with NFL owners? Are there small egos in those rooms and very nice people and no complaining or anything?
They're not really what you'd expect. I think the NFL realizes you have 32 egos and that you divide and conquer. So I think that the NFL really kind of controls the meetings. They're not what you really finding all these individuals standing up and stating, all these different reasonings. I think they're pretty calm, actually.
So let's talk about it. When the team was owned by Wayne Huizenga, you bought originally, I think in 2008 or so.
2008.
2008, you bought 49% with an obligation to buy another 51% or so.
We had a buy-sell on the other 51%.
So you bought it the subsequent year, and you paid roughly 1.1 billion or whatever it was, something like that?
1.1 billion.
Okay. So is it worth 1.1 billion today?
No, it's
No. Worth more.
considerably a lot more.
And would you ever sell?
No,
Never going to sell.
no.
Okay. And were you a football player when you were younger?
Yeah, I played high school football.
Really?
Yes.
What position were you?
Tackle.
Okay. Now, there are a lot of people who are owners of NFL teams who are Jewish. Are there any Jewish football players, actually? There are more owners who are Jewish or more players who are Jewish?
Well, actually, we have a Jewish quarterback,
Really?
Josh Rosen. So
Wow.
the answer
Okay.
is,
All right, so there are some Jewish players.
I wish he was a better quarterback.
Now,
Maybe I'd be playing today.
now, did you ever think you were going to be an NFL player?
Not a quarterback.
No. Okay. All right,
No.
so let's talk about how you actually came to be an owner, because it's not that easy to buy a team. It costs a fair amount of money. So let's talk about your background. You grew up originally in Detroit area,
Yes,
and then your father was an inventor.
right.
What is
Not-
an inventor? Is that like a real job that you just kind of tinker with things, or?
Well, I mean, he was always tinkering and always in the office trying to do something.
Is that a steady income when you're kind of tinkering?
Not really. He did well. He married my mother.
Okay.
And she had
All
a
right,
wealthy
and
father.
and what did your mother do?
She was just a housewife. you know.
Okay, so you grew up in the Detroit area and you went to ninth grade there, but then your family moved to Miami for high school.
Right.
And why did they move to
I
Miami?
mean, my grandfather had bought a hotel, and my father, I think his inventing days, were over. He had a living, and he went down to help manage the hotel. A real mom pop.
What was the
type.
name of the hotel?
The Martinique,
All right, you're living in Miami Beach and you went to high school in Miami,
Miami Beach.
all right? And so you did, I assume, reasonably well in high school.
Not really, but anyway.
Oh, you didn't do that. But you were a football player, so you didn't have time.
You weren't supposed to.
Right, okay. Originally, you went to University of Florida?
I went there for the first year, then I transferred to the University of Michigan.
Okay, you liked the cold weather better, or what? Why did you do that?
Well, it was always a dream to go to the University of Michigan, and I didn't have the grades to get in right out of high school, so I was able to transfer, from Florida up to Michigan, and it had a real impact on my life, and I think that's one of the reasons why I've been so active with the University of Michigan.
So you've given the University of Michigan about $400 million?
Yeah,
More?
maybe a little more.
More than 400
More
million,
than-
okay. Has University of Florida ever said to you, well, you were here for 1 year, why don't you give us something?
I don't think they know who I am.
Oh, really? Okay. No, I
Don't tell them either.
I think they know who you are. Okay, so you go to the University of Michigan, and then you decide to be a lawyer. You go to Wayne State Law School, right?
Right.
Did you want to be a lawyer?
Not really.
Why'd you go? Because you were Jewish? You had to go to law school or medical school?
At that time, we had Vietnam, we had a draft.
Okay.
So I decided I stayed in the Army in
Okay.
school till I was about 26.
And after Wayne State Law School, you went to NYU to get a master's in tax?
Yes.
Okay, then you went back to Detroit and you worked at an accounting firm?
I was a tax lawyer. in
Tax lawyer.
Detroit.
And,
Yeah.
okay, and then you went to New York
Right.
in investment banking?
Yeah, that's where I ended up working for an investment banking firm and thinking I would go back to Detroit eventually. But, it's like I came home to a place I've never been, really.
All right.
Once you get to New York, it's an exciting place for young people that really, want to succeed. And
Okay, so you work at Bear Stearns,
Right.
and then you got fired.
Right.
And did you get fired because you just were smarter than everybody else and they didn't like smart people, or what do you think the reason
That sounds good.
Right? All right, okay. All right, so how hard is it to call your mother up and say, I've got a law degree, I've got a master's in tax, and I've been fired? Is that hard?
I needed money, so
So
I wanted to stay in New York. I didn't know what I would do. I didn't think I would be able to get a job. I didn't want to go through that process again. So, I kind of thought at that point in time, what do I know, where the great opportunities are, and where do I have my interest and passion? And kind of thought of a process, wrote out a business plan, and I started, my own
Okay.
company.
So your mother lent you $10,000?
I had to live.
And did you ever pay it back, or?
Yes,
Sort of.
more or less.
Why didn't she she didn't want equity in your company? If she had equity, she would be pretty
I
wealthy.
told you I had a good mother.
Okay. All right. So nobody negotiated for equity for her. She just got
Right.
the money back. All right. So you started a company called Related, right?
Right, yes.
Where did you get that name from?
When you start looking at real estate, and there's so many aspects of how it's related, like we had related development, related management, and so it was kind of a name that kind of made sense from that standpoint. And, it was a bad enough name that nobody had ever used it before. So.
All right, so you have the name Related, and originally you're syndicating real estate deals. You go to wealthy people and say, would you like to invest in this real estate project or something like that?
In those days, we had a lot more business cycles, as you know, and it was either boom or bust in real estate. So I saw the idea that you had to have a steady stream of income, and then you could invest those profits into development, because that's really where you can really make large sums of money. So it was like we had this financial service arm, which was the syndication side. At that point, it was selling tax losses to wealthy investors. We had a different tax law at that point in time, using those profits to plow it back into development. And since I didn't know anything about development at all, I saw the opportunities in affordable housing. I did strictly, I think, for the first 6-7 years of my career, all I did was affordable housing.
Right, so to people who are not real estate developers, what does a developer really do?
Well, I mean, it's the one who finds the land, has the concept, hires the architect, works through the plans, makes sure the building gets built, on budget, on time, and then manages it when it's completed, and assumes all those responsibilities.
Okay, so you became one of the larger developers of, let's say, low-income housing or subsidized housing in the United States over a period of time?
Just before I started the company, Lyndon Johnson had these great society programs that really set up the government to provide the funds for affordable housing. And then they had the Section 8 programs the government initiated after. And so it was really a question of taking the government subsidies and applying them, across the country. And I saw when I read it, I said, this is too good to be true. And we really, I think, I started the company in developing in '72, and by 1980, we had built something close to 8,000 units.
Let's suppose I want to buy an apartment in Hudson Yards. What would it cost to buy an apartment there?
Now is a good time to buy because the real estate market in New York is soft,
So any deals I could get?
I got a deal for you. Trust
Really?
me. Stop the interview right now. Let's make a deal.
So you were doing a lot in this area of subsidized housing, low-income housing, affordable housing, and then ultimately you build a development that became the biggest development in New York at that time, which is the Time Warner Development Center right on Columbus Circle, south of Central Park. How did you get the right to do that, and why was that such a big deal?
I was motivated, like most people who, you want to do something impactful in life, and it's not a question of money. You're not really working because money, everybody can make money, but you want to do something impactful and that's, and meaningful and challenging.
All right, so Time Warner became a big development. It had the Mandarin Oriental, it had apartment buildings, it had lots of office space. Time Warner had its offices there, and you lived there as well.
Correct.
So ultimately, though, you decided to build something even bigger, which became the biggest real estate development in the history of our country, called Hudson Yards. So for people who don't live in New York or don't visit New York, what is the big deal about Hudson Yards?
Well, Hudson Yards was, what was happening in New York, over 60% of the buildings were over 60 years old, in New York, and they were obsolete. And New York was growing, and the hottest area of New York was a place called Chelsea, which was down there. And I saw the idea when the Hudson Yards came about to creating a live-work-place environment. People are looking for sustainable developments, and Hudson Yards, by building a live-work-play environment right in the middle of New York, there was a real need for it. And we were able to attract the corporations because they're looking for talent. And Chelsea was really the hottest part of the city where the young people
Okay.
are.
So you got the right from New York City to build this in around 2008,
Yes.
and that's what the time the recession was going on. So was it scary to get that right then?
We had just went under contract in 2008 before Lehman and the crisis really started, if you'll call it that. And then before we signed we had signed our letter of intent and had put up some money. But before we went hard, we had negotiated some points in the deal that we wouldn't have to start the project till certain events happened. That, in other words, that there would be an office market, there'd be the availability of money, and that the condo market would be able to absorb
Okay.
the units.
For Hudson Yards, the total square footage, is it like 16 million square feet or something like that?
Well, it started out with the city with Hudson Yards was really what the request for proposals was roughly for about 13 million square feet. We went out and we acquired land around it, so our development today will be over 20 million square feet.
And how much is the total purchase price? How much did you and the lenders and all the investors have to put into this to make it work?
Well, I mean, right now we're in it for probably 15 to 18 million.
Billion.
It will probably be somewhere between 25 and 30 billion. I mean, billion, not million.
25 to 30 billion.
25 to 30 billion.
Okay, and you're going to make a profit on that?
I would hope.
Okay. Okay. All right. So no project in the United States history, commercial project, has ever been that expensive. Even Rockefeller Center many years ago was modest compared to this. Is that right?
If you look at it in terms of square footage, which is really, I think, how you'd measure, the size of something, it's the largest private development ever in the United
So
States.
why didn't you consider calling it the Ross Yards or Ross Center? You didn't want to put your name on it?
No.
No. And now you have a sculpture there that's very famous. Some people think it's great. Some people think it's not so great.
Who doesn't like it?
Well, a couple architecture critics I read.
Well, the New York Times doesn't like anything that we do.
All right,
so
but explain what that is. What is so controversial? You picked the architect. You saw him from something he designed at the Olympics, and then he designed this sculpture. What is the sculpture?
Well, we call it the vessel. It's really a 150-foot high series of steps, if you will, that you can walk around, and we want to create the new heart of New York. And so I looked at it, you had to have some type of iconic structure. And if you look at New York, and I would look at, and I think, you take Rockefeller Center, which I looked as being the heart of the city. And every tourist, especially during Christmas, everybody goes to Rockefeller Center. And so I wanted some type of structure that would be a 365-day Christmas tree.
Okay.
So I looked for it, and I found this designer, Thomas Heatherwick. So I selected it. I didn't know what the cost was. Everybody thought I was nuts, but I think it was
What did it cost?
What did I think? I thought it would cost maybe $75 million, and it cost probably about $160 million.
You convinced a lot of famous companies, BlackRock, KKR, among others, to move there. Do you have to personally go to Larry Fink at BlackRock and say, move from where you are to Hudson Yards?
I mean, I was involved in selling all that. I mean, and the appeal was, look, corporations today survive by getting talent. And and they saw, one, they're in obsolete space, and they knew this is where their talent wanted to live.
Okay.
And so I think when we sold them, they could see what we were creating. And we were very fortunate to get probably the top companies in each field in New York. So it wasn't in one industry. We hit across all industries. And without building it and opening it, I mean, I love saying it, we get the highest rents in New York today. And it's probably the area that's most in demand.
You don't mean to say the highest rents. You mean the rents that are most appropriate for what you're giving
for that
people.
space, for the great thing that we built, yes.
Okay. Let's suppose I want to buy an apartment in Hudson Yards. What would it cost to buy an apartment there?
Now is a good time to buy because the real estate market in New York is soft.
So any deals I can get?
I got a deal for you, trust
Really?
me. Stop the interview right now. Let's make a deal.
If somebody is watching this and says, I want to be like Steve Ross, I want to be a successful real estate developer, what is the skill set?
I mean, I think to be successful in anything, you have to have a passion for what you're doing.
Let's talk about your philanthropy for a moment. You've signed the Giving Pledge with Bill Gates and Warren Buffett and so forth. Why did you do that? Why did you agree to give away half your net worth? What do your children say about that?
I don't think they have anything to complain about. Start there. But I mean, yes, I'm giving away most of my net worth. You know, I've taken care of my children. And I just believe in giving back. You know, some people look at it, their families dynastically, and other people, and I believe I was very fortunate, and I want to give it back and do something that's significant. And so I think I kind of grew up with that idea, you know, and I don't think, you know, there's a feeling of not feeling entitled. And
so what are your passionate causes in philanthropy?
you want to do things that are impactful. You just don't want to just, you know, give it away in that. And I mean, I have certain interests that really I'm very involved in. You know, well, first of all, you know, you start with education and making the cities and places where you live better. But today, I mean, to me, the biggest area of concern that I have is the environment, climate. I think that's, you know, that impacts everybody, and, you know, any disease or anything you might give to, when you talk about survival, you know, there's nothing more impactful than that.
If somebody is watching this, or somebody's in the audience now and says, I want to be like Steve Ross, I want to be a successful real estate developer, what is the skill set? Is it smart, hardworking, luck, money from your mother? What is the thing that makes it possible?
All the above.
All of those, okay.
I mean, I think to be successful in anything, you have to have a passion for what you're doing. And, you know, and if you have that passion, I mean, it was great, and I looked at affordable housing from the standpoint, you're doing well and you're doing good at the same time, and using that as the basis. And today, you know, affordable housing is still probably the greatest need that we have in America, and will continue to be one of the great things. But I think, you know, to be successful, as you know, building your company, it was a question of you have an idea and you expand upon it, and then you connect the dots as you grow, and you never stop working.
So when you build your company Related, like my company, Carlisle, your company, at some point you say, well, that somebody else can run it day to day. You might reach a certain age where you say somebody else can run it. I am not the co-CEO any longer. I'm co-executive chairman of my firm. Are you the CEO still?
No, I'm just the chairman. And I mean, I think, you know, you only grow companies by really surrounding yourself with great people, you know, with like-minded ideas and thoughts and doing things. And I think, you know, I attribute most of my success, or almost all my success, to really the people I've surrounded myself with, and their partners, you know, and I look at them, and working together and executing is probably the most exciting thing in life.
So did your parents live to see your success?
Partially. I mean, you know.
Did they ever say, well, you should have worked harder, or you should have stayed as a lawyer? Or they ever say that?
No, my mother never could describe what I did, so I was always a lawyer. Okay. My son, the lawyer, you know.
You know, you had this incredible career. You've become a very wealthy person, well respected. You own a football team, a happy family. Any regrets about what you've done with your life?
Well, I regret that we're not playing in the Super Bowl this weekend here in Miami. But no, really, I mean, I really love what I do. You know, I still have great passion for it.
Look, a very successful career. Thank you for taking the time today. I know you're very busy this weekend because everybody's here, wants your time, everyone wants a ticket. By the way, if I needed a ticket, how would I get one?
You want a condo? I got a ticket.